Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. It is Tuesday, October the 8th. Coming up, we will bring you up-to-the-minute updates from around the region as Central Floridians prepare for Hurricane Milton. Central Florida Public Media reporters are in the field providing information about the area's flood risk, sheltering for the unhoused population, and evacuation locations and routes. And we'll check in with Florida's state insurance advocate on what you need to know about preparing for a property claim once the storm passes. First, though, Hurricane Milton is wavering in strength. It was downgraded to a 4 yesterday as it moved past the Yucatan Peninsula last night. An update from the National Hurricane Center just over an hour ago shows Milton has nearly strengthened back to a Category 5. It remains a monster storm with the potential of being one of the worst hurricanes in Tampa in over 100 years. Impacts will be felt in Central Florida. I spoke with Megan Borowski, senior meteorologist with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. Borowski starts by explaining when Milton is expected to make landfall.
So right now we are expecting late tomorrow, so late Wednesday into early Thursday morning. It could be a few hours within midnight hour. And that's when the core of the storm is expected to make landfall, probably near the Tampa Bay area, give or take a few miles. But keep in mind that we are expecting impacts ahead of the core of the storm moving onshore. We're going to have the eastern half of the storm impacting a good portion of the Florida Peninsula, really late morning on Wednesday through the afternoon, and of course into the overnight as we anticipate landfall.
Megan, would you consider this a fast-moving storm, or is it slow-moving so that we might expect more rain?
Well, it has been slow over parts of the Gulf of Mexico. It is going to pick up speed. It certainly will not be a slow storm as it moves over the state. But even with its forward speed, we are expecting some localized rainfall accumulations of over a foot. This is going to be closer to Tampa and then also eastward, perhaps closer to the Space Coast. Toward both coasts where we have more moisture in place is where we could get over a foot of rain. And then widespread totals between 8 and 10 inches can't be ruled out for the I-4 corridor.
I think a lot of us got alerts on our phones yesterday about hurricane watches in our area. When do we need to be in place, ready to ride out the storm in Central Florida?
I would say, today is the last day to make preparations. By tonight, be ready to just hunker down and shelter in place. Of course, if you're on the coastline and you're told to evacuate, get out. But by tonight, I'd say make sure everything is done, because tomorrow, later in the morning, from southwest to northeast, we're going to start to see those bands of heavier rain move on inland. We're going to have a tornado risk throughout the day tomorrow. And then, of course, as the core of the storm comes on shore, that's when winds are really going to pick up. And as the core of that storm actually moves through the Orlando metro area, is when we'll have the greatest risk for those hurricane force winds. But ahead of all of that, we'll have the tornado risk and the rounds of moderate to heavy rainfall and that risk for flash flooding.
We're not really used to having a Category 2, potentially, pass over the Orlando metro area inland. People come to our area to evacuate in the metro. So what are the risks with Milton in an urban setting, potentially?
Well, so we've got lots of developed land, and so that means we're going to have a lot of runoff from this very heavy rainfall, potentially, for the area. So flash flooding is going to be a risk. Those areas that are covered by vegetation and soil are going to become saturated. If we have any trees, plus those, plus the wind gusts, we'll likely see downed branches. Absolutely. We could see down trees, down power lines. All of that will start to mount as we get into the evening and overnight hours tomorrow into Thursday. So that's going to be a risk. And widespread power outages, we're expecting those as well. So being inland, at least we don't have to worry about the storm surge inundation, but there's a litany of other threats here with the flash flooding, the heavy rain, and also that tornado risk. So, I urge everybody, as you're finalizing your preparations today, to make sure that you have a way to get weather alerts, especially for those tornado warnings, because those get quickly issued. And, some of the tornadoes that hurricanes can spawn can be strong. It doesn't happen all the time, But we do get stronger tornadoes every once in a while from these hurricanes. And so again, since this is a nighttime and early morning storm, you might not be on high alert because you're tired or you might be going to sleep. Please have a way to get warnings that will wake you up. So if you do have a tornado warning, you can get into that safe spot in the innermost room on the ground floor of a building and get as much as you can in between you and the outside. Bring a mattress, have a bicycle helmet, something to protect your head. And again, that tornado risk is going to be high, and that's something that we haven't had a whole lot of attention on yet with this storm and in coverage. We've been talking a lot about storm surge for coastal areas, but that tornado risk is going to be heightened too for those inland locations.
Actually, since you brought up the risk of tornadoes,
Yeah.
we have a lot of new people in the area. And, we don't have basements in Florida. Can you remind us of where to go to be safe?
Right. Yeah, so you're going to want to go into the innermost room of a sturdy building. You do not want to be in a mobile home. Innermost room away from windows. The idea here is you've got these really strong winds from a tornado on the outside of, outside, and you want to make sure that you are putting as much distance between those really strong winds and whatever debris is lofted in the air and has become a projectile. You want to put as much distance between you and that as possible. So get into an interior room. If you have time to bring in pillows or a mattress, sometimes you don't have time, but drag that in, jump into a bathtub, is what a lot of EMs suggest, and pull the mattress over you. Wear a football helmet. I've seen that a lot being advertised as a good method or a good thing to protect yourself. Wear a bicycle helmet. Just protective measures and protective items to cover yourself and to increase that distance between all of that debris that is swirling around outside in those very strong winds. Distance between you and all of that.
Megan, can you talk about the East Coast as Milton heads into the Atlantic? Why is there storm surge with the storm moving away from the shore?
Right. So you've got to think about how winds move around a hurricane. So it's an area of low pressure, winds move counterclockwise. So if you consider yourself relative to the center of that storm, counterclockwise means we'll have onshore winds if you're located near or generally north of the center of the storm for the folks on the Atlantic coast. Because they'll, as the storm is moving eastward offshore, the land of Florida will be to the west of the center. And so those onshore winds are going to be for the areas north of center. So anywhere from the Space Coast all the way up to Jacksonville needs to be on alert for storm surge flooding. 3 to 5 feet is the general forecast right now for the Space Coast and areas farther north. And so that's going to be a threat too. I know we're focusing on the West Coast, but the East Coast cannot rule out all of the same hazards, maybe not the same magnitude as what Tampa is going to experience, but Daytona Beach, certainly 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, very, very heavy rain, and of course that tornado and wind threat as well.
I'm talking to you as someone who's been through hurricanes before, and I want to make sure that we're serving all of our audience and the new listeners as well. Are there any misconceptions that we need to be aware of as we get through this storm together? I'm thinking about once it passes and then you get that lull, it's not over yet.
Right. As if the core of the storm is moving directly over your area, do not venture outside until you get the all clear. And really, the all clear will probably not occur until late Thursday morning into the afternoon. And it's in the aftermath as well, depending on how hard your neighborhood has been hit. You don't want to be going out and exploring. For many reasons. First of all, there's hazards. You could have downed trees and power lines, live power lines. In floodwaters, you can have very sharp debris, bacteria in the debris. We don't know if sewage has seeped into the floodwaters, and dangerous animals. We all know about snakes and gators, here in Florida. And so floodwaters harbor those things as well. So there's dangers in trying to go out right away. And also, we want to make sure that the path is clear and roads are not congested so emergency officials can get to where they need to be. So if you are safe in your location after the storm passes, shelter in place until you get the all clear from local EMs. Let them do their jobs to get to those communities and to the people that really need the help immediately, and then venture out. And of course, if you need help, then reach out to your local police department and emergency officials to get that help post storm. But we don't want to do damage touring and kind of going out to get those snapshots for social media. Let the recovery begin, because especially for locations directly in the path of this storm, we're going to need all hands on deck after Milton moves off into the Atlantic.
Megan Borowski is a senior meteorologist with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. Brevard, Flagler, Lake, Marion, Orange, Osceola, Polk, Seminole, and Volusia County schools all closed on Wednesday, October 9th and Thursday, October 10th. There is more ahead here on Engage. Our team of reporters is fanned out throughout Central Florida. We'll check in with them for an update on evacuations, inland flooding mitigation efforts, and the impact on unhoused residents in our community. You can find constantly updated storm updates on our website, cfpublic.org. That is where we are streaming live now. Thank you for listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, many in the region may have to file insurance claims once Milton passes. We'll parse out some of the important nuances associated with homeowners insurance.
A lot of homeowners who have homeowners insurance policies believe that their homeowners insurance policy will also cover any damage caused by flooding, especially if that flooding occurs during a hurricane. And unfortunately, homeowners insurance policies do not cover damage as a result of flooding.
Florida's state insurance advocate, Tasha Carter, joins Engage to answer questions about filing insurance claims. First, though, let's talk about the threat of flooding that comes with Hurricane Milton. Time is running out for people interested in getting sandbags to protect their homes from rising water. Several closed at noon, but distribution sites are open throughout Central Florida. Let's run through a few. Volusia County self-serve locations are open until 5. Brevard County Public Works is providing sand until 6 tonight. They have locations in Titusville, Merritt Island, Melbourne, and Palm Bay. Just a reminder, it is illegal to fill sandbags with sand from the beach. Orlando residents can go to Camping World Stadium until 6. Sites are open at several Orange County parks until 7 tonight, weather permitting. And Lake County has sandbag locations scheduled to be open until 7 or until weather conditions become unsafe. To discuss the imminent and long-term threats being posed by flooding from Milton, let's go to Central Florida Public Media environment reporter Molly Durig. So Molly, you're monitoring areas of concern that frequently deal with flooding, including homes along the St. Johns River. And yesterday, the National Weather Service identified 4 locations where they're predicting significant hydrologic activity along the St. Johns River near Astor, DeLand, Lake Harney, and Sanford. Can you talk to us about how these communities are preparing? And just with all the rain we got on Monday, where do things stand now before Milton even hits?
Right. Yeah, we've been having a lot of rain lately, partly left over from Hurricane Helene and then partly just regular rain events, which we know are bringing more and more rainfall with climate change. We have, 4 areas, as you mentioned. Right now, the biggest area of concern is the area of the St. Johns River by Astor, which is in Lake County. And that is now up to a forecast of major flooding, up from a forecast of moderate flooding yesterday. This is as of about 10 a.m. on October 8th. So the National Weather Service is forecasting major flooding in the Astor area of St. Johns River. And then also looking at the other areas that we mentioned, we've got the area of DeLand has now been upgraded to moderate flooding forecast there. Same deal for Lake Harney, which yesterday was only looking at minor flooding. And then we've got the Sanford area they're now forecasting minor flooding there. And of course, all of this can change as the storm shifts, but basically, long story short, more flooding forecast today versus yesterday at 4 of those locations. And looking at Lake Harney, looking at the data from this morning, it's hit the 6-foot marker, where for that lake, that's the marker where action would need to be taken, according to the National Weather Service. Mitigation action would need to be taken by one of the water regulators beforehand to try to mitigate bad impacts from flooding. And so one of the things that they can do the St. Johns River Water Management District can actually control and regulate the water levels in some of our lakes, like Lake Apopka. They can use a canal system and a relief mechanism to lower the water levels ahead of time, which can really help. And they work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on some of those structures. So there are things that they can do ahead of time to lower the water levels in areas of concern.
And Molly, you also spoke with some rural Volusia County residents who fear recent development will intensify flood damage. Are you finding that's a common narrative as Central Florida's rural communities are adapting to this growth?
Yes, absolutely. That is a common narrative that we are seeing across Central Florida in rural areas, but honestly, not even always in rural areas. We've seen, in some cases, communities complaining of construction projects or nearby developments that were built to newer building codes. So older neighborhoods, again, even in some more urbanized areas, alleging that flooding is getting worse because these newer developments are being built up several inches. Sometimes they'll bring in several inches of fill to build up these developments, which is good in the sense that it's safer according to newer building code. But of course, you have these older neighborhoods that were not built under the newer building code that are at a lower level. The water has to go somewhere. And in Florida, with an overall flat terrain, again, it's going to kind of take whatever pitch it can and go down to those lower neighborhoods. And we've seen that a lot with, obviously, this is one of the fastest growing areas of the country. Lots of people coming into Central Florida, lots of people who want to live here. But what does that potentially mean for the other communities that were built a long time ago? And so this is something that we're really observing in real time. We're seeing local governments really grappling with this and doing what they can to try to mitigate flooding for these older communities. But it's a really fascinating and often very tense situation that's unfolding in real time.
And as we talk about the importance of these prevention and mitigation efforts, you've done reporting on the long-term impacts of flooding, in addition to the immediate damage and danger that it brings.
Yeah, that's right. So in Central Florida, a lot of the infrastructure for stormwater and sewer, a lot of that infrastructure is older and is in need of upgrades. Meanwhile, we have, as we've been talking about, this explosive growth coming to Central Florida. A lot of the times, when we have unprecedented rain events, when we have historic rain like we did with Ian, some of those systems were just pushed beyond their capacity, which can cause flooding and in some cases cause flooding of sewage. So this is a good lesson. I mean, if you see floodwaters, just don't walk through the floodwaters at all.
And Molly, speaking to residents around Central Florida, there does seem to be a bit of confusion about flood mapping and whether they're actually in a flood zone and what that actually means for their property liability.
This is a really important and really interesting conversation. I spoke earlier this year with Sanford's public works manager, and he said something that really stuck with me, which is flooding doesn't follow the rules. So I think that's really important for everyone in Central Florida to keep in mind that these flood maps that FEMA, they come ultimately from FEMA, they're about mainly flood insurance. Technically, they're called flood insurance rate maps or FIRMs, and they do identify the special flood hazard areas where flood insurance is required, but that does not mean that other areas cannot flood. There's also something really important to keep in mind, which is that a lot of these flood maps are not fully up to date. Florida does quite a good job keeping up with the flood mapping, as we've learned from our reporting earlier this year for Central Florida Seen and Heard. And that makes sense, right? Because Florida accounts for nearly $8 billion in potential annual losses from flooding, which is more than anywhere else in the country, according to First Street Foundation. So it makes sense that Florida would be interested in making sure the flood maps are up to date. But that said, there's only so much you can do with that because, first and foremost, the new development that we see happening. You know, there's new developments being approved all the time. And given the pace of growth that we see here in Central Florida, there's really no way for local governments and then FEMA to keep up with every single new development that pops up. And that does change. The new developments, they are changing the stormwater paths, the way that stormwater is flowing and being channeled. And that does have an impact on flooding. So all that to say that, yes, look at your flood maps, obviously, get flood insurance if it's required. If you live in an area that has had flooding, you know, in recent times, even if you're not in a flood zone, you should probably think about getting flood insurance.
Central Florida Public Media environment reporter Molly Durg, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, Florida plans to open 4 large state-run shelters today. Governor Ron DeSantis said one can hold tens of thousands of people, and one will be in Polk County. These are designed, though, to be a shelter of last resort, according to the governor. Additionally, county-run shelters are opening throughout Central Florida ahead of Hurricane Milton. Lake, Marion, Orange, Osceola, and Polk counties opened shelters today. Seminole, Volusia, and Brevard counties will be opening shelters tomorrow morning, that is Wednesday, October 9th. Unhoused and homeless people are so vulnerable to the impacts of Hurricane Milton. Central Florida Public Media's Lillian Hernandez Caraballo joins Engage to talk about efforts to provide refuge in our region. Homeless Services Network of Central Florida activated their collaborative efforts to get unhoused Floridians off of the streets and into shelters. Can you talk about those efforts and just the impact of the growth of homeless numbers in the region?
Absolutely, Sharon. The numbers, according to the point in time count of this year, has shown that homelessness has grown by 125% in the last year alone. Now, this count might not be accurate. In fact, some people are saying it might be conservative, but due to that, the efforts to get these people into shelter have expanded. So what the Homeless Services Network of Central Florida is, that's the main agency federally funded by HUD, actually organizes a greater Orlando area, counties, cities, organizations, partners. It kind of activates this collaborative effort every year when there is a storm or some sort of life-threatening situation. And they start getting right to it. They coordinated with links for free bus rides to shelters. And right now, due to the growth in the streets of unhoused people, we actually have these shelters that will be opening, and they'll be expanding other spaces they normally would not, such as dining halls, gyms, anything that they wouldn't normally open, even their chapels. So people can have a place to lay down for the evening, even though they'll be a little cramped, they'll be safe.
And how are these organizations connecting with people on the streets? Describe the outreach under emergency circumstances like this.
Right. So that is part of the effort, right? Is that outreach to people. A lot of unhoused folks may not know that these places are open, where to go. So there's actually a group of people out there right now going to the places where they would normally find people like this, drop-in centers, the woods, encampments, anything like that, to let them know about this. They take them some water, sometimes maybe some chips, and then let them know their evacuation routes, the best places they can go to, and sometimes give them bus routes so that they know exactly where to go. If these people have pets as well, that is an extra problem. Homeless shelters will not take people with pets, but general population shelters will, and they cannot discriminate against somebody for being homeless. Also, Sharon, if the shelters become full, the homeless shelters become full, or any of the general population shelters, buses will take people to the next shelter with availability.
Can you talk to us about some of the biggest concerns to safety? I'm thinking exposure during the storm and potential flooding, or even in the days after the storm as well.
Yeah, when you're out, flooding is a really big problem. But one of the biggest concerns when people are out and exposed to the storm is the wind gusts, is those tornadoes, is that sustained winds. It is getting debris knocked on you. It is getting large pieces of debris that can knock you unconscious or really hurt you, coming at you, just maybe landslides, anything like that, that could just be actual physical things knocking you down or even burying you down. Those would be like the biggest concerns. The day after the storm, we're talking a lot of messes, a lot of debris. A lot of these people live in the woods or in public spaces, but they're not excluded from the number of people who can contact cities and counties and public works authorities to let them know that their area needs cleanup, which is something most of us have to do the next day after a storm if an area is being neglected.
Are there discussions about what happens the day after the storm? You know, there will be damage in the public spaces occupied by the unhoused, and there will be a pause in many of the services.
Yes, the day after the storm, once shelters close their doors, people are expected to go back to where they would normally go, whether it be with friends, family, or out in the streets. Again, if the places are cluttered with debris, they are welcome to call their public works and local offices to come clean up areas that are being neglected from debris and the necessary cleanup. A lot of these people already exist and live without commodities such as running water and power. So they have learned to make their way with that.
Lily, we know many unhoused people live with the possessions that they are carrying with them. What happens to that property when they go into these shelters?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, the Christian Service Center and the Samaritan Resource Center in West and East Orlando, respectively, although they are not overnight shelters, have offered their space to hold on to people's private property, personal belongings until the storm is over and while they're being sheltered elsewhere. So as long as they drop off their items today by 4 or 5 p.m., preferably, no later than this afternoon, they will gladly keep them until Friday morning or whenever the shelters let them go.
And are families able to stay together in these shelters? I'm thinking of the unhoused families with children.
Yes, that is a big concern. Unhoused families with children or women alone, people with special needs. These people often try to find family or friends to stay with because they do find it safer. However, of course, these shelters are more than happy to accommodate families and people with special needs. In fact, in some shelters are specifically open for people who have electrical needs for their health. However, when it comes to families, yes, they can go to general population shelters, or even if they go to homeless shelters, absolutely, they'll be kept together and accommodated. Pets as well in general population shelters.
Lillian Hernandez Caraballo is a Report for America Corps member covering housing and homelessness for Central Florida Public Media. We've heard from Central Florida hospitals preparing for Milton. Nemours Children's Hospital in Orlando has canceled all specialty care clinic appointments, imaging, exams, surgeries, and procedures for Wednesday, that's October the 9th, and Thursday. All Nemours Central Florida primary care, specialty care, urgent care locations will be closed on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Advent Health Central Florida said it has stockpiled thousands of gallons of water and generators to run its hospitals on emergency power as of Tuesday. Hospital officials are reminding residents that hospital parking garages are not public shelters. Although people may want to come visit loved ones in the hospital, it is really best to stay off the roads and remain at home until this storm has passed. Also, Central Floridians who need non-urgent medical care can take advantage of complimentary video visits with medical providers at Advent Health CentraCare. This is happening from Wednesday, October 9th at 8 in the morning to Thursday, October 10th at 8 a.m. All you need to do is use the code Milton. Video visits are available 24 hours a day. And of course, if you are experiencing a medical emergency, call 911. We continue our coverage of Hurricane Milton with Central Florida Public Media reporter Joe Burns. He joins Engage now with developing information as time is running out for our region to make these last-minute preparations. Let's start with some of the pressing issues that need our attention now. What have you learned about evacuations in our region, Joe?
Sharon, 2 Florida counties have announced mandatory evacuations. Volusia County's order, which takes effect at 8 a.m. tomorrow, is mostly because of potential flooding and storm surge. The county says you need to evacuate if you live east of the Intracoastal Waterway or in manufactured or a mobile home, low-lying areas or other areas that may be prone to flooding, along with campsites and RV parks. We've got a storm surge warning all along the coast in Volusia and a flood warning across the county at the St. Johns River at Astor. At a news conference yesterday, Sheriff Mike Chitwood said there'll also be a curfew in effect tomorrow night, and he's urging residents to stay off the beach.
I really don't need anybody out there sightseeing or storm seeing and then making yourself an emergency and endangering first responders. We have a job to do. There's going to be a point in time during the storm that we might not be able to respond. So I implore everyone, please listen to the directions that are being provided by county leadership, and let's get through this safely.
The Marion County evacuation order takes effect at 6 p.m. today. It applies to mobile homes, RVs, modular type homes, and any structure in which the resident feels unsafe. Sumter County doesn't have a mandatory order, but emergency managers there are strongly recommending that residents in mobile homes, RVs, or any structure that might not withstand high winds, and those in low-lying areas or people with special needs consider evacuating.
And Joe, you're also hearing from utility companies about what to do before evacuating.
Yeah, that's right. The power companies are really stress the importance of certain safety measures, like staying away from downed power lines, avoiding standing water, because, water is a very good conductor of electricity, and operating your generator outside at a safe distance from your home. But with so many people having to evacuate due to flooding, Duke Energy is underscoring the importance of turning off the power at the circuit breaker panel or fuse box when you leave. Otherwise, when that power is restored, you could end up with a house fire.
Okay, good to know that information. So the Orlando Utilities Commission and Duke Energy are two of the power companies in the path of Hurricane Milton. What are they doing ahead of the storm?
I had an interview with Duke Energy Florida's president, Melissa Seixas, yesterday, and she's very, very concerned about the enormous impact of Hurricane Milton. It'll be a storm like we've never seen before, she says. So there'll be extended outages. Duke is expecting more than 1 million of its customers to lose power, and she's coordinated a response that includes 10,000 workers, including crews from the Midwest, and they may be pulling in contractors from Colorado.
It is like staging an army because you have to keep them safe. You have to have a place for them to sleep. You have to feed them. You have to do their laundry. It is a very detailed operation, which is why we prepare all year long.
Duke just finished restoring power after Hurricane Helene, and Milton looks like it's going to be a lot worse. Luz Avila with OUC, that's the Orlando Utilities Commission, says they'll have 5 times the normal restoration effort. But she's concerned that because many crews from other states are busy working to restore power and water in North Carolina after Helene, the mutual aid will have to come from much farther away.
So what are the power companies telling residents they can expect from Milton then?
Well, for many customers, they'll be without power for an extended period. The companies prioritize their efforts first with things like hospitals, and then major lines that serve thousands of customers, and finally, your street. Here's Avila at Orange County's Hurricane Milton press conference yesterday.
I want to reiterate that Milton will cause outages in our service territory, and we ask for customers to prepare for multiple days of being without power. It is possible that a large percent of our customers can be without power, as we saw with Hurricane Irma, which took multiple days to restore. So please plan accordingly.
She's asking customers to have patience.
Central Florida Public Media's Joe Burns, thank you for sharing this important information.
Thank you, Sharon.
Orlando International Airport will be pausing commercial operations tomorrow morning ahead of Milton. Now, MCO itself will remain open to accept emergency aid and relief flights as part of recovery. Commercial operations will resume as soon as possible after a damage assessment can be conducted. But passengers should check their individual airlines for flight updates. The Greater Orlando Aviation Authority says the airport is not an authorized shelter and cannot be used to accommodate residents or passengers during hurricanes. We are also hearing from other transportation authorities across Central Florida with their updates that they're issuing ahead of Hurricane Milton. Let's run through some of those now. Melbourne International Airport shutting down as of 2 p.m. Wednesday. As of now, they're planning to reopen on Friday morning. Mathers Bridge and Merritt Island closed to boating traffic about just over an hour ago. Brevard County causeways don't close during storms, but Sheriff Wayne Ivey there said they will be closing temporarily after the storm to assess damage. Florida Fish and Wildlife officials are urging caution when boating, but they say they do not have specific laws against being out during a storm. They said local or state mandates dictate whether there will be restrictions or not. Volusia County has issued, as we mentioned, a curfew as of 8 p.m. Wednesday. Port Canaveral, that remains open landside and preparing to stop vessel and waterside operations, though. Officials have advised the public to remain clear of the area unless they have official business there, and they will continue to provide updates as the storm approaches. Lynx and Votran, the bus systems, are ceasing operations once wind speeds hit 35 miles per hour. Space Coast area transit buses will not run all day, Wednesday or Thursday. Marion Transit will close Wednesday, resuming operations Monday. Flagler County running any scheduled services for Saturday before resuming rides next week. Let's check in Ocala now. SunTrans services will be suspended starting at 3 tomorrow. They are anticipating resuming operations Friday once conditions are deemed safe to travel. I know I went through a lot of information. You can find the latest updates about these closings, the shelters, evacuations, new posts from our reporters sharing important resources as we all navigate Hurricane Milton. It's getting posted constantly on our website, cfpublic.org. Next here on Engage, the state's insurance advocate tells us what you should be doing now if you're left with damage to your property, including your car, after Milton passes through. I want to mention that we have a new way to connect with you. We can text now. We can communicate as we navigate the impacts of Hurricane Milton. You can send us a question, comment, or photo if it's safe to do so. That number to text is 833-793-9633. You can just text the word ENGAGE to 833-793-9633. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Florida's largest insurer, Citizens Insurance, issued a statement warning policyholders to prepare themselves for a major hurricane. Rain, wind, storm surge, it all poses a risk in an already saturated region. Tasha Carter joined Engage to share some important information and tips for renters and homeowners who may need to file insurance claims. She is Florida's insurance advocate to represent consumer interest when insurance decisions are made. Carter begins this conversation by identifying priorities for homeowners as hurricanes approach.
The first thing that they should do is they should make sure that they have inventoried all of their household items and personal property. When you do that, you can do that either via video, with your cell phone, with your mobile device, but you want to make sure that you include receipts, photos, purchase dates, and serial numbers. And this is going to be very, very important because if those personal items get damaged or they get washed away due to flooding or storm surge, you want to make sure that you have this inventory saved in the cloud and you can access it very, very easily and provide that list to your insurance company as you go through the claims process. And it's definitely going to make the claims process that much easier. You also want to ensure that as you are completing your household inventory, gather all of your important insurance documents together as well and place those in a waterproof, fireproof container. And so those documents should include copies of your homeowners and or flood insurance policy, copies of your auto insurance policy as well. Make sure that with the copy of those policies, you also know the name of your insurance company and you have the contact number for which you would file an insurance claim after the storm, and any other important documents, if they're financial documents or any other important documents, they should be kept in this waterproof, fireproof container as well.
The inventory that you were just mentioning that we need to take account of, is that for property owners or renters or both?
That would be for both. If renters have a renter's insurance policy, then they would also want to make sure that they are inventorying their personal items as well after the storm. If those items are damaged, they would be filing a claim with their renter's insurance company, and proof of the personal items that were damaged, once again, would be required as they go through the insurance claim process.
And we're talking to you before the storm hits, so we should start thinking about making these documentations before. Is it kind of like a before and after? Is that what you're kind of going for?
Yes.
Okay.
Another tip that is very important as you are preparing for the impact of a storm is to ensure that you protect your property. That may include buying materials that you need to secure your property and minimize your losses, from covering your windows with shutters, siding or plywood, moving your vehicles into a garage or to a carport if possible, or maybe relocating them outside of the major projected area. If you're in an area that could potentially flood, you want to move your vehicle to higher grounds as well, so to put that vehicle in a position where it is better protected. Also, one other important point that I would like to share is when you are completing your home inventory, also make sure that you inventory any items that are located in your garage, or if you have a storage shed on your property, make sure that you're inventorying those items as well.
And you mentioned moving vehicles to higher ground. What about cars that will be damaged by flooding? Can I expect my regular car insurance to cover that?
Very good question. Yes. If your vehicle is damaged by flooding, you should contact your auto insurance company and file a claim directly with your auto insurance carrier. Flooding related to automobiles would not be covered under your homeowner's insurance policy, and it would not be covered under your flood insurance policy. That damage would be covered under your standard auto insurance policy.
We're talking with Tasha Carter. She is Florida's insurance consumer advocate. When do I open up the lines of communication with my insurance provider? I imagine they get slammed after a storm.
Yes, they do get pretty busy after a storm, but insurance companies are prepared. They typically increase the number of personnel that's available to answer calls coming in through the claims call center. They also typically increase the number of adjusters that they have on hand so that those adjusters can be available to go out and adjust the tens of thousands of claims that may be coming in. And this is a practice that the insurance industry does every year. And typically they begin this preparedness process usually around April or May, before the start of hurricane season, and they have these resources, at the ready in the event that they are needed. So the insurance industry is usually able to very quickly respond to and receive calls coming in as it relates to claims and just other general questions from impacted policyholders.
I'm wondering what people should do who have recently had their policies maybe dropped or changed by private insurance or companies leaving the state, or even those with citizens insurance, which is a last resort for many. What do they do?
So those homeowners who are covered by Citizens would follow the same process that they would if they were covered by a private insurance company. If they do sustain damage, they should report that damage and file a claim with Citizens as quickly as possible so that adjusters can get assigned, they can come out, they can inspect that damage, and of course, begin the claims process and the recovery process. For those homeowners whose homeowners insurance policies may have been dropped or non-renewed, and they have not been able to purchase replacement coverage and they are currently without coverage, those homeowners should, as I shared earlier, try to do everything that they can to mitigate their home from damage from the storm. And if they do sustain damage, FEMA is a resource and is available to provide financial assistance to those homeowners who are uninsured or underinsured.
Would you mind explaining to people who are new here that home insurance does not cover flood insurance? What do you need to know there?
That's another great question. So unfortunately, a lot of homeowners who have homeowners insurance policies believe that their homeowners insurance policy will also cover any damage caused by flooding, especially if that flooding occurs during a hurricane. And unfortunately, homeowners insurance policies do not cover damage as a result of flooding. You must have a separate flood insurance policy, and that separate flood insurance policy would cover the damage that may be caused by flooding. So many consumers that have flood insurance actually have two insurance policies and two insurance companies. And so they would be required, if their home sustains damage from the hurricane, wind damage specifically, and flooding damage, they would be required to file two claims, one with their homeowner's insurance company and one with their flood insurance company. If we have homeowners who only have homeowners insurance coverage and not flood insurance coverage, and their home is damaged as a result of a flood, their homeowners insurance company will only pay to repair or rebuild the damage caused by the wind. And any damage caused by flooding would be excluded. And at that time, those homeowners, once again, would be able to apply for financial assistance through FEMA.
Are you allowed to buy insurance with a storm pending? And I guess I should ask you about homeowners insurance and flood insurance.
That's also a very, very good question. And so typically, the insurance industry does not sell homeowners insurance policy once there is a tropical storm or hurricane watch or warning that has been issued for any part of the state. So as soon as that happens, the insurance industry suspends their binding authority, and they will not issue any policies until the storm has exited the state and all of the hurricane watches and warnings have expired. Typically, with the purchase of a standard flood insurance policy, there is usually about a 30-day time frame before that policy becomes effective. So once again, if you attempt to purchase a flood insurance policy today, if you are able to purchase one, the effective date of that policy is usually going to be 30 days from today. So it would not cover any flooding damage that may be caused by Hurricane Milton.
Just talking to you, this is a lot to navigate. I'm wondering, is there any other advice that you could offer to renters and homeowners as we get through Milton together?
Absolutely. I would strongly recommend that if there has been evacuation orders for your community, that you adhere to those evacuation orders. The most important thing that we want to keep in mind is we want to protect our lives. That's the most important thing. And so with the strength of Hurricane Milton, the projected storm surge that's going to come with the storm, we definitely want to make sure that everybody takes the necessary precaution to protect the lives of themselves and their family. In terms of protecting your property in the aftermath of the storm, if your property has sustained damage, I would recommend that you make any emergency repairs that may need to be made in order to prevent further damage. If that means, there's a hole in your roof, you may want to tarp that hole even before you file that insurance claim so that you can protect your home so that it doesn't get damaged any further. When you do that, you want to make sure that you document the damage, take photos and videos before and after, and you want to make sure that you maintain your receipts so that you can provide the receipts of the emergency repairs to the insurance company for reimbursement. If you have to discard damaged items, say they're soaked from floodwaters or water pouring in through a hole in the roof or impacted windows or doors, you want to make sure that once again, before you discard those damaged items, you're taking photos and videos of those items as well. As I shared earlier, as soon as you recognize that you have sustained damage, you want to file an insurance claim directly with your insurance company as quickly as possible. Don't contact your insurance agency. You want to file that claim directly with your insurance company. And I know for most homeowners, they are very familiar with interacting and communicating with their insurance agent or agency locally, who typically answers all of their questions relative to the coverages that they have and the type of policies that they are purchasing. But when you have to file a claim, it's important to file that claim directly with your insurance company. So it's important to have all of those specific contact informations available. Also, if you have to move out of your home because of the damage, you want to make sure that you are keeping track of all of your expenses that you may incur. If you move into a hotel temporarily, you want to make sure that you are maintaining the receipts and expenditures so that you can provide that documentation to your insurance company as well. Also, when you leave your home, you want to make sure that you contact your insurance company to provide them with the temporary address and phone number where they can contact you, because that's also important as well. They may want to speak with you regarding coming out and inspecting your home. They may want to share additional information with you. They may want to provide you with an initial check to assist you obtain and secure additional housing while you are displaced. And so you want to make sure that they are aware where you are located and how to contact you if you do have to move out temporarily.
Tasha Carter is Florida's insurance consumer advocate. Before we go, I just want to mention this. Despite reports of long lines at gas stations and some without fuel, Governor Ron DeSantis said there is no shortage of gas in Florida. Speaking from Tallahassee today, the governor said the state has a contingency plan in place in case the Port of Tampa Bay takes a hit from Hurricane Milton. He said fuel trucks were escorted by Florida Highway Patrol to deliver more fuel to stations last night. And by the way, tolls are also suspended throughout Central Florida right now. That is all for today's edition of Engage. Thank you for being with us. And be sure to stay with Central Florida Public Media for regularly updated information on Hurricane Milton, especially as it affects communities in Central Florida. I'm Sharon Stone. Thanks for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up.